So let's just start by breathing down into the pelvic floor. So we'll start with a very brief meditation or a guided experience. And so when we breathe down into the pelvis, it's more surrendering naturally into the pelvis. Really coming into presence. Perhaps there was a little bit of excitement or frustration of trying to get into this system here or getting onto this call. And just really following your breath. And ask yourself the following question, which is, if you are looking to be free from just one thing, whatever that might be, that could be doubt or sadness or some thought that you're having, or perhaps a repetitive experience, what would that be? And just allow whatever to come. One of the things that I often say to people is that each of us is searching for something, and that when we cease hiding from ourselves, that's when we begin to discover it and to uncover it. So quite often what we tend to do is to identify the experience that we want or the thing that we want in life. So the experience could be a more joyful life or a feeling of more success or even a feeling of more connection, say friendships or to nature or something like that. And of course there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that, and it's all rather good. And part of the general approach has been to try and get something as if the getting of something is going to resolve all that which is. All that which is. So for a moment, just surrender any notion or idea that you know how to get or to achieve or to reach that which you're looking for. That in itself can bring up fear. It can bring up great resistance. It can bring up a great call of no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that because I have this dream. I have this goal that I've been striving for 10, 15, 20 years or longer. hmm So the invitation is just for a moment, just for perhaps 3 breaths or 4 breaths, to surrender any notion of getting or trying to heal, trying to be happier, trying to be more successful, trying deeper connection, more connection, trying to be more spiritual or more loving, whatever it is. And perhaps you could even go as far as to say to yourself, I don't know. I really don't know how to. And just letting your body relax as you surrender knowing or any notion there is something that you need to do, any notion that there's something for you to do. And so sit now with the thing that you identified that you would like to be free from, and see if there's been any change. Because what there can be is this striving to be free from something, this constant pull. And if you can imagine this sort of cartoon image of there being some bubble gum or gum on the pavement and your foot gets stuck to it, and as you move forward there are these mm, cords or tentacles that tend to pull you back, or that you've got a bungee jump tied to your waist. And so ask yourself that if with the giving up, the acknowledging that you don't know how, or giving up on the idea of striving towards something, efforting towards something, just feel into that which you want to be free from, and let us see what has changed. And perhaps you could even allow yourself to move closer to it, really, really close to it. So perhaps it's grief, perhaps it's depression or anger, perhaps it's a pattern that you have that you've described as being destructive, perhaps it's impatience or perfectionism, or intolerance, or negative self-talk. There will be a whole host of things that we want to be free of, either elements of our past or things we've identified that in our personality that are not useful for us, are causing us problems in our relationships or work, etc. So see now if you can move closer to it. Now that you've surrendered any notion that you can do something or achieve something or get hold of something, just to move closer to it. And continuing to follow your breath, not trying to do anything with your breath, but just being with it. And feel for yourself if there's any temptation to go back into any grasping, trying to resolve something, trying to find the answer, or wanting to find the resolution. Like, I need to know how to overcome this grief or depression or anger or problem that I've got. To simply, with another breath, just surrendering that. And see how comfortable you can become with simply not knowing how to. And just to get closer to what is. Even when what is unpleasant, such as anxiety, bitterness, anger, grief, depression, outrage, a whole range of emotional responses that can be frequently with us or hold us as a hostage. To simply get closer to it, to become really intimate with it. In my experience, the only way that we can become intimate with something is when we cease resisting it. All of our struggle and all of our suffering really comes from arguing with and resisting what is. And with what was. And so we're either resisting what is or we are resisting what was. So you might have decided that the thing that you wish to be free from was caused by, and there may be plenty of evidence to support that, was caused by the action of another. Perhaps the way your mother spoke with you when you were a child, or perhaps there was some event or a series of events involving violence or some other form of abuse. And so perhaps all of that happened, that perhaps was the beginning or the start of this particular feeling. Perhaps we're standing there saying, it should not have happened. So much of our suffering is really centered around this very thing. It should not have happened. So what would happen now if you take whatever is present for you, whether it's an image from the past, and you were to say, it did happen, and give it permission, which is also rather odd because your permission for it to happen or not to happen, our permission for it to happen or not to happen, is really irrelevant to something that already is. And so whether we agree with something or don't agree with something, it is irrelevant when it is an event in the past. And so we hear our world, we hear politics, we hear political groups, we hear many crying out it should never have happened. And so we fight against that which should not have happened. Personally and collectively, and what that does is create a lot of suffering. For we can only heal what actually happened. We cannot heal what should not have happened. We can only heal what actually happened. And hopefully that's making sense to you, that we can only heal what actually happened. And then there's another part to that. It is moving into the acceptance that that is what happened to me. And moving beyond any reasoning or argument that states that it should not have happened to me. Why me? With another question that can be equally asked, well, why not me? Why not you? Why not me? Why not you? Why not that other person? And so in this world where each of us is exploring and we're looking for peace or healing, to be healed of something, so looking for that, then the first major step in that healing is indeed to accept that it happened, and that it happened to us. Happened to you, happened to me. And so when it comes to finding our greater purpose in life, whatever we've come forth to manifest as, to express as, and that can come in many, many different forms, the acceptance of what is and working with what is, and the acceptance of what happened in the past is a major step, because much of our life force energy goes into resisting all that was. And that resistance can be to all manner of things, not only to our childhood, but also to the nation that we were born into, the religion, the politics, etc. And my advice here is not about becoming um, passive. It's really about dealing with what is, because if there's a foreign army walking down your street right now, you have to deal with what is. And so what I'm wanting to communicate is that this acceptance of what was and what is isn't about becoming a passive individual that allows abuse of the self or of a group. But in terms of healing ourselves as individuals, there has to come a point in which we cease arguing with fate. We cease arguing with the story that we were born into. Because each of us is born into a story that is already being told. There's your mother's story, there's your father's story, there is ancestral story, there's the family story, that generations, and each family has a story, and the stories can be very varied, such as we're the family that works hard but never gets what we want. We belong to the group of people that are discriminated against, or we belong to the group of people that suffered. Or I'm the mother who was abandoned by her parents. I'm the one who never got enough love. Or I'm the one in the disappointing marriage. Or the father who says, always overlooked, or I'm frustrated in my career. So we get born into stories that are being actively retaken, like a jacket, like an extra piece of clothing. And we become part of that story. And mostly what we do then, when we start to wake up to the discomfort of that, we didn't get exactly what we needed, we didn't get exactly what we wanted from mother or father, we start beginning to have some weaknesses there or challenges there. And so then the resistance starts when we say, I don't want to be like them. I don't want to live that story. And sometimes being in full rejection of what was. Or into the whole matter by, in a way, becoming the superior child who understands the parents and the grandparents and the family history better than anybody else. Now that I can understand it, I can move beyond it. However, it's a child to be happier than us. And part of the most important inner movement to bow with deep respect to the story, to who is, acknowledging who is. Looking at the imperfect father, looking at the perhaps the heaviness, lightness, the success, the story. Even if there was violence in your household, or even abuse, or neglect, can even be quite extreme. Some of our, and when we say bowing to it, it's really about accepting who it is. It's about accepting what is. And it's not about sanctioning or condoning, accepting, but also movement where we begin to separate ourselves from the fate and destiny of the other. Mhm. When we come to the point of realizing that we, when we have energy invested in wanting justice or vengeance, or to see the other person get their just desserts, their karma, that's a lot of life force energy. So if I refer back to each is looking for something, we see something ourselves, we begin to, with the amount of our energy that is tied up in being in the business of the other, which is realized the karma or consequences or the life path or the results, what you want to use for it, for the purpose that that person who, and at one stage I had a to my head by an armed robber, of realizing that that is none of my business. Now that can be quite shocking and surprising. How can none of my business if they're the one who hurt me? If you want to be tied up in their fate, their fate is, but to step back from it. Grossest of negligence that you might have experienced. To say what my brother, my sister, my uncle did, my father did, what my auntie said to me, how she behaved, and or ex-boyfriend, ex-wife, ex-girlfriend, what that robber did, what that rapist did, is none of my business. The only business that I have is to acknowledge what happened with me and to me, to bring about the process of the other person way, and to have no investment in what happens. It could take them close to an eternity to resolve that issue for themselves, to fully own what they have done and part of their own suffering that led to them causing suffering for another. So if we go back to what in this moment would you like to be free from, ask yourself, am I in the business of something else or someone else this me to this? Do I have anything invested? Can I truly say it's none of my business whether or not this person ever see what they've done, even acknowledge if that never happened? In fate of another or death of another, for something to happen. We get stuck in the other to apologize, or get stuck in resisting that it actually happened. What I tend to do is it energetically them are out of our So let's have a what you needed from your mother or your father, or from some other caretaker, or even with a former partner. This person not only didn't give you what you needed, but also hurt you in some way. And to do is to energetically with them in the hope that if somehow we can pull them out, they'll finally get to see us for who we are. Mm-hmm. Were to say, I give up. Give up. But what if one of you was an alcoholic? Or lost some violence, or some other kind of abusive behavior, or in depression or neuroses, whatever it might be. That what if one of your parents was really lost in something, or a former partner? There comes a point where we perhaps need to forgive ourselves that our love was not enough to save them. This could be a friend, could be a colleague. To really acknowledge that we're not enough, that I could not do enough to save them from their darkness. And what we tend to do is we go there and we meet them, we join them there, we meet them in the darkness for two reasons. In the hope of pulling them out, but what ends up happening is that we get stuck, and still, because we're looking for the payoff of finally getting what we needed. And when we accept, this is what happened, we didn't get, then we can step out into the light, and perhaps they may follow us, or perhaps not. And so there's a great freedom there in fully accepting what is. And with these parts of it happened, the abuse happened, the rape happened, the violence happened, the lack of affection happened, whatever it was, or the history of my family that happened. There might be some big political upheaval or some big movement of history that your family was deeply affected by. It can be a war, a famine, pestilence, disease, slavery, all sorts of things. Pogroms, the Holocaust, some political movement. So when we move into that place of truly accepting what is and not arguing with what is, and then truly accepting what happened to us, and we can, well, what makes me so special to me. Question to contemplate. What makes you so special? What makes me so special? That it's sort of me. It's a fact of life. And so when we give up this idea of doing with what and with is, the freedoms come. And so there can be, again, much fun in saying to those who didn't give us what we needed, I give up. So then we're left with something. And as I said, again, back at the beginning of the a couple of times, each of us is searching, hiding from ourselves, we start to find it. So I'd like to open up to questions now. Questions or a brief sharing, if you have something that you would like to share, some insight from material that we've just been working with, or if you have a question, please speak up. So then I'll just ask one of you to share. Good morning, Anna. I see you there from Salt Spring in Canada. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, Shavasti, I'm here from Salt Spring.
So how is your morning so far, and what's been happening with you during the call?
Unfortunately, the reception hasn't been all that good. It's been a little bit choppy. But I have had one or two wonderful insights. And so much. One of the things that just recently you mentioned was, and I'd never looked at before, was the idea of because of what happened in my childhood, abuse, alcoholism, all those things. And it meant so much to me when I realized what I heard you say. If, we go to meet them in the darkness, and that meant so much. And then you said, what is it about you that is so special? And that, for the first time in all the work that I've done, in all the things, I've worked through, I really never touched on that essence
Mm.
of how special I felt in
Mm.
the dealing with the things that happened in my childhood. This made me kind of special somehow. So that was a real aha moment, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
And there are two edges to that sword. And thank you for bringing that side of it too. There's one is the thought of, well, what makes it so special that it shouldn't have happened to me? What makes me so special that it shouldn't have happened to me when it's actually happening to millions of people across the planet?
Mm-hmm.
Why should I be the exception to this rule? And then the wounding itself can become part of our specialness, which is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
It
Yes.
becomes part of the special path, so it becomes a new part of our identity.
Mm-hmm.
So being the unwanted child or the unloved child or the misfit or the child with the alcoholic parents, etc., that then becomes part of our new special identity.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and so there are all these different jackets that we can wear, particularly as as I've said many, 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 many times, we are born into a story that is already being told. And so when we identify the story that's being told, and there are different variations on it. There's mother's story, there's father's story, but then there's also the general family story and the cultural story. Let's say you're raised in a ghetto, so there's a ghetto story, or you're raised as part of a particular minority. That could be a religious minority or an ethnic minority, or some kind of particular grouping. Then there's a story behind that, and we take these stories on like cloaks,
Mm-hmm.
and they become part of our identity. And so we get born into a story that's already being told. It is from the moment of conception, it's there. It really, really is there. And we have these loyalties to these ancestors or those ancestors and to the official story of our particular grouping. And so ponder for a moment, what story was it that you were born into? What was the main story? We're, we're the hardworking ones. We're the ones that never get what we want. We're the victorious ones. We're the brave ones. Um, or we're always victims. And our victimhood is more important than their victimhood. That group of people over there, oh, they haven't suffered as much as us, so our victimhood is more important than their victimhood. And so these are all the kinds of things that we get born into, and we do start to question them as we awaken. Of course we do, but the loyalty to them can be very, very insidious. And so for me, one of the most important inner movements has been to give up, to be able to say, Mother, I give up. I give up. In our family, we can have those individuals, they can be brothers or sisters or parents or uncles or aunties, who live in a kind of a hell. And living in that hell, we can get very stuck in constantly trying to go in there to pull them out. Which is why I said that one of our movements needs to be forgiving ourselves that our love was not enough. That can be very, very difficult. Because there's this whole, we have lots of ideas and images and beliefs around enoughness. It would seem sacrosanct for me to say, be at peace with the fact that you're not enough. Where, particularly in 5 minutes' time in a different context, I could be saying you are enough.
Mhm.
But there are certain things for which we are not enough. And that certainly is with regards to the path of another and their life and their karma, their fate. It doesn't really matter what words you use. And as a child, and it doesn't matter whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, you're still someone's child, whether or not your parents are still alive. And so as a child, it is literally too much for us to carry the responsibility of another. And so what if you were, each of you on this call and listening now, if you're going to be listening to this as a recording, what if you were in this moment to really meet being not enough, to really meet being not enough, just being not enough and allowing that. And being not enough is not in the context of being not good enough or smart enough, beautiful enough or clever enough or lacking some way as a soul, but being not enough of you to hold up the solution, the healing for everyone around you or for your family. Mhm. This has been a very important part of my own personal journey in terms of realizing that if I have a workshop and there are 30 people in the room and I have them all day, so that's 8 hours, sometimes 9 hours, that it is not possible for me to say the right words with the right tone, with the right pitch, to the right person at the right time the entire day. Despite all of my experience, I'm not capable of doing that. I'm not enough. And that I can never do enough for everyone that is gathered. And so when we make peace with not being enough, which is very different to having the belief that you're not enough. This is a different not enoughness. But making peace with your own limitations, with our own limitations. When we make peace with that, with our own limitations, great freedom can come from that. And so there are two things here in terms of stepping into greater freedom. That is accepting what is, ceasing to argue with what is, with what was. I have some individuals who come to me for private sessions, and one of the first things that they say in the first session is, my parents should not have got married. You might have even heard yourself say that. My parents should not have got married. But what does it do when we say that? Essentially, you're saying, I shouldn't exist. And there's great difficulty in living when we were born into a story that should not have happened. That should not have happened. And so that's one freedom, is accepting what is. And knowing that that is the root cause of most of our suffering, a great deal of it. And our beliefs around that, holding very strongly onto a belief of what's right and what's wrong and saying, no, that shouldn't have happened. That behavior should not have happened. My father should not have done that. My mother should not have done this. That foreign army should not have done this. My government should not have done this. My religion should not have done this. When we cease arguing with all of that, that's when we can meet what is present in the here and now and begin to heal. And the second part is to acknowledge fully that we're not enough. So I would welcome any questions or sharing. Was there anything else you wanted to say, Anna, and anybody else here? I think that Margie is here too. I know Margie.
No, Shavasti, I was very moved. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Are you still with us, Margie?
Yes, I am. I'm having trouble with it cutting in and out a lot.
Yes, that's what you're all reporting. So I will report it to the company that I'm using, and it all sounds very clear from this end. So anyway, Margie, where are you?
So I noticed what I am so attached to is what you were talking about, healing my family, and trying to let that go and allow them their own path, and finally just getting connected to my own path, which has been quite a struggle. So that's what I'm recognizing.
So what has been the hook for you? There's always a hook. What keeps us involved in really wanting to heal our family is because we're hoping to get something back. So I'm curious about what the hook might have been or is.
Probably the love and the recognition, being seen, appreciated, those kind of things.
So how would it be for you to say, I give up?
Pretty much, I think that's, I've done that in pieces, so I can see the progress in letting go little by little of them kind of coming into their own and living their life more fully without me trying to control it.
Right. And so when I was talking about the need to forgive ourselves, that our love was not enough to reach them, what happened? What happened with that? What happened internally with you?
Well, it's the truth, and I feel like it releases more, like letting go more of the cords that are hanging on, and seeing what it does to myself, of what I try to take on for them. It's not healthy at all for me.
I can hear in your voice that this has touched somewhere that's is or has been quite sore for you. So I appreciate your openness and your willingness. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to hear from others on the call about how you're doing, and my apologies that people are having problems with the connection. This is the first time I've used this organization, and I tried out a few, and in my tests it seemed okay. But it's just a teething problem. I'm sure that we'll be able to resolve it for the future. So who else is on the call? And I would like to hear from you. I have somebody in the 720 region and someone in the 303 region.
Hi, Shavasti, it's Ollie.
Oh, hi, Ollie. Ah, you're the anonymous caller.
Yeah, it was getting choppy on the on the internet, so I switched
Right.
to
Okay,
the
to the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, I found the when you're talking about not being enough, not enoughness, and probably carrying that through to all of my relationships for a long, long time, and actually realizing that love was enough, was perfect as it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it couldn't be seen. So for me, all the time trying to get that love and recognition,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of it's a non sequitur, because it's been. So right now, it's perfect as it was.
This notion of enoughness or specialness, depending on which way we're looking at it, there's a great peace that comes about when we realize that we are an ordinary person loving another ordinary person in an ordinary way. When we allow things to be ordinary as opposed to special, when we allow things to be ordinary, then an ordinary love can emerge that is ever present. And that is extraordinary. I know that sounds like a contradiction. But our notion of not enoughness, and so when we didn't get enough, we don't feel that we are enough. When we didn't get enough, we don't feel that we are enough. And when we fight against the not receiving of enough, so when we fight against, when we refuse the not having received enough, it actually keeps us in poverty. Because we're waiting for either mom or dad or whoever our major caretaker was in early childhood to give us something that they haven't given. And so we must try and grab it somewhere else, or become bigger or more special or more important ourselves in order to get this enoughness, to compensate for this lack of enoughness. And so that's part of the hamster on the wheel, the constant cycle that we can go in. And so we didn't get enough, and we're saying, that's bad, that's wrong, that should not have happened, we should have got more. So when we're in resistance to not having received enough, then we're caught in the cycle of never being enough. So the moment that we really, really with our breath, with our body, not just intellectually, because that doesn't really help, when we really move into this place of giving up all arguments with what was, meaning never arguing with history, never arguing with 2 minutes ago or 2 seconds ago, because it's past, it's gone. That doesn't mean to say denying that there was pain, denying that we were hurt, denying that we were injured. It's nothing to do with that, but not arguing with the fact of it. So the moment we give up arguing with the fact that our mother couldn't give us the nurturing that we wanted, our father couldn't give us the support that we wanted, when we give up arguing against that and simply say, that is what is, that happened. As soon as we give up the shouldn't, there's a release there. There's a lot of our life force energy, and it can be seen very clearly in the human energy field, in the auric field. It can be seen in chakras, it can be seen in organs, that much of our life force energy is invested in the resistance of what is. There are two main places that human beings keep their energy invested in. Invested in keeping up the facade that everything is okay, so our fear of vulnerability, and keeping our wound at bay, keeping shame at bay. A lot of life force energy is invested in that, and also resisting what is. And so a very useful question is the following. What would your life look like if you then had access to all of that energy? What if all of the energy you used to resist what was and what is, and what if all of the energy you use to keep shame hidden away, to keep vulnerability under wraps, what if all of that energy was available to you to create your life with? What would your life then look like? What would it look like? If we see the human auric field as finite, it's not really finite, but it appears to be finite, and there are certain levels which have a sense of being finite around them, but in reality they're not. But let's say it is finite for now, because there is a way in which it is. What if 40 or 50 or 60% or more of your life force energy, my life force energy, is being used to be in resistance to what is? Being used to be in resistance to what was, and being used to hide behind a mask that keeps any notion that we might be not enough or vulnerable or have shame. What if that much of our energy is being used? What's that going to lead to? Great difficulties. Difficulties in manifesting the life that we want. And so we come in and many labels are put upon us, and some labels we like and some labels we don't. And some of the labels, whether we like them or don't like them, really depend on fashion or political movement or what is actually happening in the culture at the time. But we definitely get told we're a boy or a girl, and this has certain meanings. And then there's national identity, there's ethnic identity, there's religious identity. Then there's sexuality, sexual orientation, gender orientation, etc. All of these labels that we take on, which are not us, but there's something that we start to believe that we are. And so there are lots of images around body, what's good, what's bad, etc. And so we can invest a lot of our energy in trying to be good according to the prevailing popular image. You can call that a fashion, but some of those prevailing popular images have been around for thousands of years. But they're still not truly us. So how are you doing now, Ollie?
Yeah, good. Good. I think just going back to what you were saying before, the resistance of trying to heal the difficulties, whether it be through clearing karma or various other healing modalities, and just accepting what is. Because even then, even the notion of clearing karma presents the sort of element of sin, of wrong,
Indeed.
being born in sin, in a way.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, that's been part of Western culture for a long time now, this notion of being born into sin. As I say, we are each born into a story that is already being told. It is an active dialogue, it's an active story, and it's an energy. It is an energy. Some people, the energy that they're born into is like this gray cloak, and it's taken on and it's worn and it becomes part of this identity that we have as a human being, which is far from the truth of who we are. Mhm. So this is a question for each of you to ask yourselves, but I'm also happy for somebody to answer this. Mm. Having started with the statement, each of us is looking for something, and it is when we cease avoiding ourselves that we start to find it. What is it that you may have avoided? What have you been avoiding? What truly frightens you? What truly scares you? Now, many of us have got an I am statement that is old, that lurks in the background, but it's always there, whispering with a feeling or with words. And it seems to have been there forever. And that I am statement can be, I'm bad, I'm ugly, I'm unwanted, I'm stupid, I'm worthless, I'm nothing, I'm dark, I'm not enough. And that's often the thing that we are hiding from. We don't want anyone to know that. And we don't want to have that exposed because there is a fear that if that is exposed, there might be somebody who'll point a finger and say, well, yes, you are bad. I agree with that. You are bad. And yes, you're not wanted. People like you are not wanted. I agree, we're not wanted. So our fear around exposing that, and that can even happen in the therapy room. If the therapist or the healer has no capacity to hold self-hatred or these deep core beliefs, then you can have the experience of someone agreeing or disagreeing. Mhm. Very often when we expose some deep inner core feeling, to have someone respond in a more flippant way, oh, you just need to love yourself more, or you just need to think or feel this, rather than meeting in that real intimacy with us. What is, that can feel very rewounding, that can rewound us, it can deepen it because there's shame in that moment. Our wound has caused them to be uncomfortable, and so we can feel dismissed. And we can do the dismissing as well. Perhaps you've had a friend who's been crying or expressing something, and you might even be comforting them with the purpose of getting them to stop crying. You might even say the words, oh, please don't cry, please don't cry. Look at the bright side. This happens a lot in spiritual circles. This happens a lot in circles where people believe that enlightenment or being awake or living a spiritual life is some way in avoidance of the pain. That it all has to be positive. I wrote an article on the positive thinking trap, that it can also become a form of abuse, also a form of avoiding what is. Mm-hmm. And so we've all participated in that, and we've all been on the receiving end of that. And so when we stop hiding, and there's a very, very, very big difference between being present with what is, so the pain of the moment, the grief of the moment, and being stuck in suffering. The pain of the moment is something happens that hurts us, somebody dies, or there's an accident, or somebody says some harsh words. So there's something in the moment that hurts us. And the suffering comes from saying that should not have happened. And continue to resist the event as it is. And a lot of our resistance to it is around being afraid of loss, of the feeling of loss. Feelings of loss can be very devastating for many of us because it seems like a bottomless pit. And so all of that affection that I wanted and needed as a child, that's my loss. And if I feel into that loss, it seems like this unending pit. However, loss is one of the great doorways to the heart. It is one of the ways in which the heart literally gets broken open. And so truly, when we cease avoiding ourselves, we begin to find what it is that we're looking for. Mm-hmm. Mm. I think we have Candice on the call, do we not?
We do, Shavasti, and I appreciate you inviting me to share because I've experienced a big shift in looking at how I've been resisting accepting the past. I would say up until this call, I use the word accepting the past as a way of forgiving, accepting that what happened I can't change, but I think I have still been resisting the truth of what I've experienced in the past. And so that was a big shift for me. The other part that I could relate to was how you tuned into not feeling worthy or good enough. And that's certainly been a theme for me. And based on what you just shared around being with the feelings of loss, I feel like I'm able to do that and be with myself. What feels like is underlying for me is not feeling safe in the world, to feel, to share my feelings with other people, especially in a relationship, because I'm afraid I'm going to lose myself, to going back to not feeling worthy, feeling like I have to prove myself again. So that seems like there's still an undercurrent there.
Well, generally what happens is that when we keep that hidden, we find many ways to compensate for that. And so it is an illusion that the relationship's not affected by it. And so the deeper question is, if it's not safe for you to share your vulnerability in a relationship, then should you be in the relationship? And so that's a different question.
It is.
Now, that doesn't mean to say that you're not feeling safe to expose your vulnerability in a relationship is the other person's fault. I don't want that to be inferred. Mhm. Sometimes the other person has got no capacity to be with vulnerability. Mhm. Mhm. I have observed many, many times is that many women tell me that they want their menfolk to be in touch with their feelings and to be open emotionally. But normally their response when the man falls apart and shows his vulnerability is that they get frightened.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part of them that wants him to be the stoic, heroic warrior who can cope with anything. And I've seen it and I've heard it many, many times. I want him to be more vulnerable. I want him to show me who he is. And then the minute he does, what happens? What happens? I'm not saying that that's true for every woman, or that's true in every relationship, but I have seen that happen. But the other side of it is, if you then take the risk to be vulnerable and the other person has no capacity to hold that, and it doesn't matter whether it's a friendship or a lover or a partner or a spouse, if they have no capacity to be with your vulnerability, then where is the intimacy in the relationship? And so the deeper question needs to be asked of, do you need to be in that relationship if there's no space for all of you there? And so there is, of course, a big difference between being open and vulnerable and sitting in our victimhood. And so seeing a lot of emotion doesn't necessarily indicate that someone's truly in touch with their own vulnerability and with what is. Very often we can regurgitate the same emotions over and over and over and over again, cry about the same things, get angry about the same things. And because we get stuck in a particular layer, because after that is perhaps the great loss. After that is perhaps the core belief of, I'm worthless, I'm ugly, I'm not enough, whatever that might be. So often the continual catharsis that sometimes we can present as being in touch with our feelings or being vulnerable is actually just a smokescreen. Can actually, not is actually, sorry, but can actually be a smokescreen. It's a way of really avoiding. It can look very, very genuine. Lots of tears, there's lots of pain. I'm not trying to imply that people invent this, but very often there's something much deeper underlying all of that that we're still in avoidance of. So just take a deep breath for a moment. Each of you can do that. And whatever it is that you've identified during this call, if you could just say with an out breath, I give up.
I give up.
And perhaps say that out loud. I give up.
I give up.
And just see what happens with your body with that, with giving up. And so as we move through the world, and it's important to say this as individuals who are striving for more awareness, longing for deeper levels of awakening, longing to be healed, to heal ourselves and to heal the world, then there are pathways for us to discover in terms of how do we communicate what is without resisting it and without taking it on as another identity. And so how do we educate the world in terms of women's rights, gay rights, equality for racial minorities or racial groupings, without allowing those to become yet another identity that we take on that's not truly us. And so, whilst at the same time being aware of misogyny or racism, being aware of that and wanting to enlighten others with information, with perspectives, with experience, direct experience, shared experience, indirect experience, with sharing, without taking on any of those as a label. I first became alerted to this many, many years ago when I used to go on demonstrations for CND. That was a British organization, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And I went to a few meetings, and these meetings were about bringing about world peace. And what I discovered was that the most important thing, it seemed to almost everybody there, was the belonging to CND as a political group. And they were all so angry. Very, very angry people. And I was angry too. And so this fight to bring around world peace seemed to be more centered around, if only these bad people over there can stop doing what they're doing. And so what was happening was that another enemy was being created. There was often a lot of hatred and a lot of anger present in these meetings. That was supposedly for world peace. And so that can happen with anything. Whether it's women's rights, gay rights, rights for racial minorities, racial groupings, religious groupings, etc. That in our striving for rights, we can take on yet another identity that becomes a new prison, rather than being able to stand back and say, you know, this is a fact of life. Discrimination against my grouping or that grouping is a fact of life. That doesn't mean to say that we passively do nothing. But if the heart is the one to speak and to reach others, then the heart's voice has no opinions. Opinions are a function of the mind, and resisting what is a function of the mind. So this can be a whole new way of navigating the world through not even identifying with the causes that we feel passionate about. I'm not saying that that road is easy, but I'm offering it as a contemplation. That if we can fully accept that these things exist, because they do, and then from that place of not resisting what is, then to stretch out our hand to meet the other inequality, to meet the misogynist, to meet the sexist person, to meet the racist person, to meet the bigoted person, to meet the prejudiced person. As we meet and investigate our own prejudices and our own bigotry. Because there can be a lot of prejudice and bigotry hidden within our spirituality. It's there. And it needs to be met and looked at. So as unbelievable as this sounds, we have been 1.5 hours with each other, and I thank you for your time and thank you for coming to this call. And I hope that this will be one of many. I will, because of the quality of this, I will investigate other avenues to use. So my apologies for the quality of the in-out of the call this morning. And yeah, I'd just like to hear a goodbye from each of you. So goodbye, Anna.
Goodbye, Shavasti. Thank you so much. I
Oh,
would
you're
say
welcome.
one thing about the quality. I reported it, and after that, it was much, much better.
Oh,
So,
cool. Okay,
yeah.
good. Thank you.
So about halfway through, there was
Mhm.
a little box to report what was happening, and I reported it, and it seemed to improve. So,
Okay.
but anyway, apart from that, this was wonderful, and I'm so grateful for having shared this experience with everybody from this West Coast morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Margie, goodbye.
Goodbye. It was great to hear your voice, great to hear your teachings, and be connected with you once again. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Candice, how are you doing now?
I'm doing wonderful. I just want to thank you so much for all that you shared and the warm welcome into the community. I really enjoyed hearing everyone share. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ollie.
Thank you, Shavasti. That was brilliant as always, and nice to connect with everyone and to be in that space. So thank you.
Okay. I look forward to connecting you with you again soon. And Myra, I'm not sure. There's a funny. Are you there, Myra? I can see your name online, but it seems to be indicating that there's a sound issue. So it's actually telling me you didn't enter your audio pin, and perhaps you didn't know that. So we'll catch up with each other at through some other means. So thank you, everybody, and I look forward to sharing with you again. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, Shavasti.
Thank you
Ciao.
so much.
Bye.